Einfach durch.
I hope I can cope with the technical, logistical things. Good morning, everybody. I feel truly honored to be here today and to speak to you. The concept of Creative Mornings is such an inspiring idea, and I liked it right away when I heard about it, and I'm proud to be a part of it. Today, I would like to tell you about my experience to deal with fear and risk, about when I think it's worth to take a risk, and more importantly, when it is not. How to cope with risk and fear when you feel overwhelmed. What do you do when you have to make decisions with little room for error? And what do you trust? Your information, your gut, your faith, your family, your friends or informants, your intuition? The example I chose to share with you today is an early work experience. For more than 10 years, I've been a foreign correspondent, reporting about war and conflicts. And I especially spent quite some time in Afghanistan. But as exciting as this might sound, it is not why I chose this profession. I chose this profession because I believed in the necessity for unbiased information and reporting, and because I'm generally way more curious than adventurous. I think one really has to distinguish between the two. But yes, to get to the places where you find the truth, you sometimes also need to be pretty adventurous as well. I would like to start with a short story about determination and risk. When I was 15 years old, a teenager, a friend told me about Sandro Botticelli's fantastic paintings. In particular, his most famous piece, Venus, displayed in Florence at the Uffizi Gallery. And I don't know how it came, I became obsessed and possessed by the idea of going there and seeing this masterpiece. To earn enough money for the trip, I got a job with a fruit seller at a produce market in Munich, where I lived at the time with my parents. I made 650 Deutschmarks an hour. And you might think my parents were crazy to allow me to make this trip by myself, but I guess they saw that I needed to do this. Once I had enough money for the trip, I took the night train to Florence. 5 minutes after I got off the train, I was robbed by a gypsy boy who stole my purse with all my money, while his mother was distracting me with confusing questions. I quickly realized what was happening and screamed out loud while the boy ran away. Luckily, a man grabbed him, shook him, and gave me back my purse. That was shocking already. 2 minutes later, an Italian guy asked me where I would like to go. I told him the address of my hotel, a very modest hostel in a monastery, and he offered to take me there on his Vespa motorcycle. Barely 2 minutes after taking off, my trench coat got caught in the spokes of the wheel and was completely torn. We did make it to the hostel in one piece and he dropped me off. It turned out that the room at the hostel was way more expensive than I was told. So I first had to negotiate an affordable price with the nuns running the place, which were pretty tough to negotiate with. And as a 15-year-old, that's not an easy thing to do. Then finally, I was able to start out of the museum. On my way there, I ran into another German traveler. He told me he was just robbed. And I believed him. I felt so sorry for him and gave him 20 marks. It turned out that this was simply his way to make a living. And when I realized that, I felt so bad, I was ready to cry. I called my dad at home and told him, "Florence is awful, people are mean, and I want to come home." And instead of feeling sorry for me, he laughed out loud and said, "Well, you wanted to go to Florence so badly, now you're there, and now you will stay and figure it out." You can probably imagine that this did not do too much to comfort me. But it certainly strengthened my determination to move on. Yes, it was tough, but I did go to the Uffizi Gallery, and I did go to see Botticelli's unforgettable Venus. What counts for me today is I had a vision and I went for it. And I enjoyed the result of my courage. Since then, I have trusted my instincts, I made mistakes, paid for them, learned quickly, and kept moving. One thing I would like to mention, no matter what we do, we have to hope for good luck. We will never be able to just plan everything perfectly. And thanks to whoever has helped, I was lucky then in Italy and most of the time since. 15 years later, I worked for the political magazine Der Spiegel. I did stories for the domestic desk. But what interested me most was the question, what will Germany do after the unification? When Germany comes back onto the international stage with all her power, including her military. War emerged in the Balkans. And we, the never go to war again nation, all of a sudden, we're supposed to go back to the front lines. This question kept me very intrigued. It motivated me to suggest repeatedly stories about the mission and the vision of our military abroad. But I still worked at the domestic desk. And my stories abroad now constantly clashed with the interests of Der Spiegel's foreign desk. And the strong-minded bosses of the foreign desk tried to keep me out of their business by all means. And believe me, they knew a bunch of tricks. This was a pretty tough time for me, and I often felt completely exhausted from the silly fights over who is or is not allowed to do a specific kind of story, to fight the fight over who is allowed to write about our wars. And one freezing winter day, I sat at home. I remember it was really cold. I had a fever. I felt sick. I had a couple days off, and my boss called me and said, Susanne, the foreign desk ran out of reporters in the Balkans. By then, the German military was in Kosovo at the divided city of Mitrovica. And for the first time after the Second World War, German troops were involved in fighting to keep the Serbs and the Albanians from killing each other. And he asked me whether I could take the job. The flight would leave in 4 hours. I said I would call him back in 15 minutes. Then I called my mom for advice. She said, you should go. This is what you always wanted to do. And together with a friend, I went to an outdoor equipment store and bought the warmest coat they had, this one. Then I boarded the plane to Skopje and drove down from there to Mitrovica by car. It was a tough trip, but a good one. And together with my photographer, Knut Müller, we got a great story. By the way, all these photos you will see here are taken by him. We have worked together for many years, and his work is incredible, you will see. But now back to our topic of today's talk, risk and fear. Sometimes we need to break the rules, or at least push them, so we can move into the space we want to explore. It's not something which is provided to you naturally. You have to take it. We need to experience our fears so we can get to the point to overcome them and move on and to make a change. With that Balkan War story, I had earned my stripes, and from then on, I was a kind of a foreign desk reporter at Spiegel. After the Balkan War, my next focus was Afghanistan. Here you can see Osama bin Laden's house. I mean, the house is gone, it was bombed by the Americans, in Tora Bora. And Osama bin Laden's caves, where Al-Qaeda stored their ammunition and weapons and where the fighters were hiding. This is Osama bin Laden's house in Pakistan. In Peshawar, sorry. So he had several houses. This is where he lived with his family, also bombed. And this is a meeting for an election campaign of the first elections ever held in Afghanistan in a very, very remote area in Paktika province. I went to Pakistan, Quetta, to meet a mullah who is known to provide the leadership of Taliban with their headquarters, the so-called Quetta Shura. Maybe you have heard about it. The walls were decorated with posters with jihadi slogans, American blood, and Kalashnikovs. So how did I know that they wouldn't kidnap us or kill us? Actually, we did not. We took the risk. Is that worth it? As before, I had these questions that drove me. Who is our enemy? What kind of organization are the Taliban or Al-Qaeda? I wanted and had to find out how the Taliban and Al-Qaeda lived, thought, and who they are connected to. What is the environment they live in? So I traveled with Osama bin Laden's enemies. I think you saw them before on the photograph in the cave. They protected me, and that was the best bet at the time. And Al-Qaeda had fled to Pakistan. That was the situation. I wanted to find out whether Pakistan was playing both sides of the fence. Do they really shelter the Taliban, as many Afghans claimed? Very difficult to find out. I mean, this is an area where nobody really has clear information about anything. And to find out, I had to visit their headquarters in Quetta. And if what everybody said was true, if the Taliban were controlled by the Pakistani intelligence service, the Taliban would not dare to harm me on Pakistani soil. And the intelligence service observed us closely from the moment on when we stepped off the plane. So far to the process of decision making. From my perspective, it was somewhat daring to go there, but not unreasonable or reckless. I had analyzed the situation carefully. Of course, there is never a guarantee that things would work out okay. There's always a certain risk. At the end, you have to decide to go or not to go. It's much like everyday life. Do you stick with an unhappy marriage, or do you leave? Do you quit your awful job, or do you stay? Whatever you do, you take risks. No matter what you do, it can be dangerous for your physical or emotional health in war zones, but also in life. And I look at these risks in a similar way. Often we are not aware of the risks surrounding us in the civilized world. They are not visible. This is equally true for war and for life. But in war zones, I'm highly alert at all times. Fighters carry weapons to defend themselves or to attack. And you know that. People belong to a certain group, and you know their loyalties. I also went to see the good guys, the new police in Afghanistan. I learned to understand why the Afghans didn't trust them. They looked like thugs, and many of them were thugs. I met with refugees who lost their homes. I listened to their stories of what really happened to them. I wanted to understand who are the good guys now and who are the bad ones. In Helmand province in the south of Afghanistan, I was embedded with the US Marines. They said they would look for the bad guys and for drug dealers. And they did. This is all raw opium, which we found in a compound in the desert. And we suddenly thought, these must be really, really bad guys. But I also checked with the farmers who grow the poppies to produce the raw opium. They said, we are poor, and we would never grow poppies if you in the West didn't buy it. Interesting, I thought. A new perspective. I went to a combat mission with an airborne division in Kandahar. They said they would fight to push back the enemy, and they did, but they also lost a lot of lives of their soldiers. The Taliban fled, and then they came back. I learned that the Americans are the only nation that can make a difference in these war zones. The Germans, as almost any other nation, are only political participants, contributing bits and pieces. But when the Americans bring their air force, the enemy is on the run. But we also know innocent people always die, like the family of this man. Behind us, you see the rubbles of their village. He lost 17 family members. Only his granddaughter survived, and she's badly injured. By the way, she's in Germany now, where she got treatment. So why go there? Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq. All these places have not become safer recently. The whole region is on fire. And I'm still driven by the same questions. What is really going on there? What could we do better? And what should we prepare for? But there's more to it. Look, I remember days of endless driving in Afghanistan, towards white horizons, along riversides and lakes, through mountains and deserts. It was silent in the car. Nobody spoke. Not me, nor the driver, nor the photographer. Moments when I found myself in perfect harmony with this place and its free and untamed spirit. Bliss can be found in the most unlikely moments. We only see war now, but the history of these regions is filled with determination, beauty, serenity, and wisdom. And when you meet the people, you can discover that heritage, the free and untamed spirit. As you can see in these photos, much depends on how we approach challenges, what we make out of the moments of risk and fear. This life I have chosen is not always easy, and not always things go like I wished them to be. Weather conditions are not always as we wish. The car usually breaks down once a day. You get exhaustingly long flights, like in this photo, to the tribal areas in Pakistan. Or you are stuck in Kunduz province, like I was 3 months ago, after the Taliban had recaptured the city, you might remember that, and destroyed literally everything that our government had built up in almost 10 years. For the first time ever, after 12 years in Afghanistan, I had to cover myself with a burqa to get back to Kabul safely. I usually never wear that. But you also make friends and you develop unique kinds of friendships. This is my photographer Knut Müller, who accompanied me for more than 10 years. He's great to travel with, and his photos are amazing. So, is it worth it? This is the question, and we all have to ask ourselves. It is for me, and I want to keep doing it. I believe you have to follow what drives you. Be grateful when things go your way. You have to use your head and your heart. And you have to have a bit of good luck every now and then. What I learned is do two things at the same time. To observe the situation out there and to observe myself, to try to find a balance between what the risk could be and what my instinct is telling me. Should I go or should I stay? It always comes down to the same decision. If you don't feel your vision is strong enough, if I don't think the answers I can find are worth the risk, when there's more fear than vision, I follow my instincts and simply stay at home. Thank you.